On the night of January 24th, 1900, British soldiers abandoned a hill they believed they could no longer hold. What they did not know was that, on the far side of that same hill, the Boers were abandoning it too. By sunrise, the battlefield was empty. Britain had lost more than 1,000 men and surrendered a position the enemy had already decided to leave. It was not a failure of courage. It was a failure of maps, communication, reconnaissance, and command. Watching that disaster unfold were two men who would go on to reshape the 20th century, Winston Churchill and Mohandas Gandhi. This is the story of Spion Kop. In January 1900, the British Empire was not winning the war it had started. 3 months earlier, the government in London had dispatched troops to South Africa with a confidence that, in retrospect, borders on recklessness. The Boers, the descendants of Dutch and German settlers farming the interior of southern Africa, had declared war on the British Empire in October 1899. Most British ministers expected the whole affair to be concluded by Christmas. A few thousand irregular farmers, however determined, could not seriously contest the army that had built the largest empire in history. That confidence had been destroyed in the first week of December 1899 in what the British press would name Black Week. In the space of 7 days, the British Army suffered 5 separate defeats: at Stormberg, at Magersfontein, at Colenso. 3,000 casualties, 12 field guns lost. 3 sieges still grinding on at Ladysmith, Kimberley, and Mafeking. A war that was supposed to last 2 months had already produced the worst run of British military defeats in a generation, and no end was in sight. What came next was supposed to change the situation. Instead, it produced the single most catastrophic British failure of the entire war. Its name was Spion Kop, and on the heights above the Tugela River in Natal, in January 1900, somewhere between 1,700 and 2,000 British soldiers walked into a battle that would kill them in their hundreds, wound hundreds more, and accomplish nothing. The hill they fought over would be held by neither side by the following morning. As we opened with, 2 men were watching this unfold from the hillside, neither of them yet the figure's history would eventually know. A young war correspondent from London and an ambulance worker from India. Both of them would carry what they saw on Spion Kop for the rest of their lives. To understand how the British found themselves fighting over a hill in the middle of Natal, it is necessary to understand the strategic situation that had developed by late January 1900. The Boer Ultimatum of October 1899 had launched an offensive that caught the British badly positioned. The Boers struck in 3 directions simultaneously: toward Kimberley and its diamond mines in the west, into the southern Cape, and most powerfully of all, into Natal. By late October, the principal British force in Natal had been maneuvered into Ladysmith. 13,000 British troops were under siege. The man tasked with relieving Ladysmith was General Sir Redvers Buller. He was a decorated officer, a holder of the Victoria Cross, and by any conventional measure one of the most experienced soldiers the British Army could put in the field. He was also a commander whose qualities in individual action had not translated into the qualities required of a general officer managing a complex operation against an unconventional enemy. Buller's first attempt to cross the Tugela River and relieve Ladysmith ended at Colenso on December 15, 1899, the final disaster of Black Week. By noon, the battle was effectively over. The British had lost over 1,000 men and 12 field guns. Replaced as overall commander by Field Marshal Lord Roberts, Buller was nonetheless expected to relieve Ladysmith before Roberts's larger strategic operation in the west could begin. He was given 30,000 men for the attempt. His second attempt would be Spion Kop. The plan that Buller developed for his second crossing of the Tugela was in principle more sophisticated than the frontal assault at Colenso. He would feint to the east to draw Boer attention, then cross the river further west at Trichart's Drift and move around the Boer left flank toward the road to Ladysmith. The key topographical feature was a line of hills. The highest of these was called Spienkop. Whoever held Spienkop controlled the ground below it. Control the hill and the advance to Ladysmith became feasible. Buller entrusted the operation to his senior subordinate, Lieutenant General Sir Charles Warren, a difficult personality. Warren spent 5 days maneuvering his force in ways that consumed time and exhausted men without securing a decisive advantage. The Boers used the time to strengthen their positions. Buller pressed Warren to act decisively. The decision was made to assault Spienkop that night. Colonel Robert Thornycroft commanded the attacking column, which numbered approximately 1,700 men. They would climb the hill in darkness, seize the summit before dawn, dig in during the night, and hold the position when daylight came. The operation depended entirely on speed and surprise. Any daylight assault against an alert defender would be destroyed on the open slopes. The night climb was the only viable approach. At approximately 10 in the evening, the column began moving up the hillside. The conditions were difficult. The slope was steep and rocky, and the night was dark. When the leading elements reached what they believed to be the summit around 1 in the morning, they were challenged by a Boer picket, and a brief, sharp engagement followed. The picket was driven off, and the summit appeared to be in British hands. The column began to dig. In the darkness, working as quickly as exhaustion allowed, they dug a trench line that they believed protected the summit of Spienkop. They had reached the top. But they had made one fatal mistake, and they wouldn't find out what it was until the sun came up. As dawn began to break over Natal on the morning of January 24th, the fog that had settled on the hilltop began to lift. What it revealed changed everything. The fog lifted and revealed they had captured the wrong summit. The trench the British had dug was not at the summit. The true summit lay further ahead, and it was already being occupied by the Boers. As the morning light grew stronger, the British soldiers in their shallow trench found themselves looking up at Boer positions, commanding the ground they were supposed to be holding. The guns of the Boer artillery on the surrounding heights had clear fields of fire into the trench. The position that had looked like a captured summit in the darkness of 3 in the morning was, in the growing light, a killing ground. What followed was one of the most brutal days the British Army had endured in memory. The Boer guns opened on the British trench positions with an accuracy that reflected the clear observation available from the surrounding heights. The trench was shallow. In places, the rocky ground had defeated the entrenching tools. The men inside it had very limited cover. The heat added to the conditions as the day progressed. It was midsummer in South Africa, and the exposed rocky hillside offered no shade. Men died where they fell. The situation was already disastrous. Then the generals lost contact with the men fighting above them. Warren remained at his headquarters, largely ignorant of the true severity of what was happening on the hill. On the Boer side, Louis Botha refused to accept the position was untenable. He rode up the hill himself under fire, reorganized the units, and sent them back into the fight. Winston Churchill, the young war correspondent, watched the assault column. That evening, as the extent of the catastrophe became apparent, Churchill volunteered to carry a message up the hill to Thornycroft. He found the colonel sitting among the dead and wounded. The colonel told him bluntly that the position could not be held another day. The British would withdraw from Spienkop. By evening, both armies had reached the same conclusion. Neither knew the other had reached it too. In the early hours of January 25th, both forces were withdrawing in opposite directions. The photograph captured the grim reality of the shallow trench, the dead still in place. The hill would be empty by morning. Neither side could hold it. Mohandas Gandhi, the young lawyer, organized an Indian ambulance corps. At Spion Kop, they were among the first to reach the casualties. Gandhi later wrote that the experience marked him profoundly. He had seen the utter futility of the outcome. The seeds of nonviolent resistance were planted here. In a single day, the British suffered 1,300 killed and wounded. The Boers lost 300. Spion Kop entered British consciousness not just as a military defeat, but as a visual image. Football clubs across Britain named their steep-standing terraces after the hill, the Kop at Anfield, the Kop at numerous other grounds, so that the name became a permanent feature of British sporting culture. Ladysmith was finally relieved on February 28th. Field Marshal Roberts launched his main offensive and the strategic momentum shifted. The Boers transitioned to guerrilla warfare, what they called a commando strategy. Kitchener responded with systematic clearance. Blockhouse lines were constructed. Boer farms were burned and inhabitants gathered into concentration camps. Overcrowding and disease produced conditions in which 28,000 Boer internees died, the majority children. The peace agreement signed at Vereeniging on May 31st, 1902 ended the conflict. Britain agreed to no extension of political rights to the black African population, planting the seeds of segregationist rule and eventually apartheid. Churchill and Gandhi were at Spion Kop on the same day. What they both found there was a lesson about the consequences of decisions made badly in the rooms of power. Subscribe now to follow the series.